Forcing Peace. The December 16th episode of the 60 Minutes program demonstrates a shift in Russian television interpretations of the diplomatic process surrounding the war in Ukraine. While negotiations were previously often described as deliberately fictitious or hostile, in this episode they are presented as a real and nearly completed process, in which the key role is assigned to the United States, and responsibility for a possible breakdown is preemptively redistributed. An analysis of the content reveals that the focus is less on peace as a political compromise than on the legitimization of victory through negotiations. Negotiations as a form of pressure, not dialogue. The central concept of the episode is forcing Zelenskyy to peace. The very formula sets the framework. Peace is not the result of mutual concessions, but is interpreted as the consequence of pressure from a strong actor on a weaker one. The negotiations in Berlin are described not as a multilateral process, but as a rigid vertical, in which the US demands that Ukraine fulfill conditions declared key for Putin. At the same time, Russia itself barely figures as a participant in the negotiations. It is marginalized, occupying a position of power whose demands will either be accepted diplomatically or implemented militarily. This allows the Russian side to simultaneously distance itself from negotiating pressure and maintain control over the final outcome. Territory as a reality, not a subject of discussion. Openly Nazi approaches, a blatant disregard for what the Nazi regime in Ukraine is doing, just like Hitler and Napoleon before him. Much has been said recently about the new US national security strategy. One of the main goals of this strategy is to ensure that Europe knows its place, that Europe doesn't try to upend the liberal order it has been proud of for decades, and that it cooperates with democratic administrations in the United States to strengthen this liberal order. It's to ensure that Europe minds its own business, that Europe doesn't continue to try to drag the United States into its games. Rather dishonest games designed to promote the liberal order that suits the European elite in the political life of all other countries. Direct interference in internal affairs, including the suppression of election results, as happened in Romania, and the rigging are absolutely evident. So, the US national security strategy tells Europe, mind your own business and don't expect us, the United States, to constantly support you in your adventures. We have more important matters. We see that theft is in the Europeans' blood, as evidenced by the frozen Russian assets. This urge to steal is apparently genetically inherent in many of our Western colleagues. Now, however, they're starting to argue among themselves about whether it's legal to steal Russian money. One of the key conceptual devices of the program is the depoliticization of the territorial issue. Donbass is presented not as a disputed territory, but as a reality already lost for Ukraine, which is merely proposed to be legally formalized. The formula, recognize the realities on the ground, is used to exclude the very possibility of an alternative discussion, including from the perspective of international law. Thus, territorial concessions are not presented as concessions. They are relegated to the category of forced recognition of facts. This is fundamentally important for external perception, as it absolves Russia of responsibility for border changes and shifts it to the course of history and the outcome of military operations. Security guarantees as an empty shell. The interpretation of the so-called NATO Article 5-style security guarantees without membership deserves special attention. On the one hand, they are presented as an unprecedented offer to Ukraine. On the other, they are immediately and consistently devalued. It is emphasized that Article 5 itself does not guarantee automatic military intervention and allows allows for a wide range of responses, including symbolic support. This ambiguity serves an important function. For external readers, it creates the impression that Ukraine is getting the most it can. For domestic audiences, it seems that these guarantees lack substance and therefore do not compensate for territorial losses. In both cases, the outcome is the same. Kyiv's rejection of the deal appears irrational. Europe as a failing doctor and a source of threat. The issue consistently contrasts the US and Europe. Washington is presented as an actor trying to understand the root causes of the conflict, while Europe is portrayed as an incompetent and ideological player incapable of strategic thinking. The image of a failing doctor who treats symptoms but doesn't diagnose serves not only a metaphorical, but also a political function. It deprives the European Union of its status as a full-fledged regulatory actor. At the same time, Europe is portrayed as the source of a broader threat, including the revival of Nazism and the undermining of democratic procedures. These assertions require no proof within a given logic. They act as a moral framework within which any European initiatives are preemptively discredited.